because that's where we're going to be. And so I am prepared to cover the whole chapter. I don't know that I'm going to be able to get through it or not. If not, then I will stop wherever I'm at and we'll continue in next week. So that's just where it's at. But there's so much here. There's so much good stuff here. And last week, if you look at, you've heard me mention this before, and you've heard this before, that not all chapter breaks are an actual end of the thought. And so if you look at chapter 20 in the last few verses there, 45, 46, and 47, in long robes and love greeting in the markets and the highest seats in the synagogues and the chief rooms at feasts, which devour, and he says, widows' houses, and for a show make long prayers, and the same shall receive greater damnation. And so he's talking about these scribes, these religious leaders, and he's saying about them and how they do things for show, and how they wear these long robes, and they pray these long prayers, and they use their etiquette, and they use their vocabulary, and they use these big words, and they do all of this for a show is the whole point. They're doing it so they can be seen and to show off their abilities or whatever that would have you. And so he mentions that, and then chapter number 21, it says, and he looked up and saw the rich men casting their gifts into the treasury, and he saw also a certain poor widow casting in thither 2 mites. And so we know this story, and many preachers have preached on this text, on the fact that she gave all, and the reality is she did give all. If you research what she gave, Jesus is illustrating, it literally says, rich men casting their gifts into the treasury. And so you have that. Now, when you gave in this time period, they didn't pass an offering plate like we used to do. They had this box, or they had this one place you would go to cast in your giving. And people would pay, sometimes cast in jewelry. It was, they would put in, a full tenth of their spices or whatever it was, their 10%. And so with that being said, they would go, and he's illustrating these rich people who gave out of their abundance. In other words, it's like, hey, I've got $20,000. I made $20,000 this month. Here we go. I'll toss a couple $100 bills in there, and that's good. That's more than anyone else is giving. And then he's illustrating this widow who comes in, and he had just talked about widows being taken advantage of by these religious elite. And so he mentions this widow, and she comes in and she puts in 2 mites. Now, we might think of, what is that? Is that 2 pennies? Is that $2? From what I could research, and you can research this, and maybe you'll find out, a better equation than me. But from what I can research, 2 mites were 1% of a day's wage. 1%. If you made $100 in a day today, then that would be $1. But the reality is, so many people, and we're going to see this in this text, so many people focus in on the amount that I gave rather than the heart of the person when they gave it. You see, the illustration was not to beat up on the people who had more means, but it was that they were just giving out of extra. Here we go, I'll just toss a few here. But this woman came in and said, hey, I've got 2 mites. Here you go, tossed it in. In other words, she was saying, I'm giving my all. It's all going in. And absolutely phenomenal when we think about this. This widow must have been a welcome sight when it comes to Jesus, because he's sitting here dealing with all of these people who were out to get him, out to try to trick him, out to trip him up in his words, trying to use what he said against him, all of these sort of things. And then he sees the faith of this widow who just says, here you go, I don't have much, God, but what I do have, it's yours. It's yours. And so encouraged by that, she gave that, but the reality is, this widow might have kept one for herself, and she could have been justified in doing that, but that's not what the Bible says that she does. And no one could blame her if she did, by the way. But that's not what she did. You see, I want you to see here that this widow, the Bible says in verses 3 and 4, he says, and he said, of a truth I say unto